Joining us today is Amanda, the lead instructor from ReBuilding Center, and she is going to teach us about plumbing. So thank you everyone for being here. We appreciate you. And Amanda, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the ReBuilding Center. I am really glad to be with you here today. We're going to be talking about plumbing and some basic plumbing repairs and some things to look out for. We recorded this class, and I'm going to be showing the video here just in a quick moment. But we will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat for questions, and I will come back on screen at the end of the video and we'll answer all of those questions for you. So if you have questions during, please write them down as you think of them, and we'll get to them at the end. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and play our video.
My name is Amanda, and I am one of the instructors here at the ReBuilding Center, and I'm very pleased to have you all here this evening to talk about plumbing repair. So my goal this evening is just to kind of run through a bunch of plumbing basics and give you some ideas for places to look for potential leaks, and hopefully you will feel more confident about what to do when you are looking at a plumbing issue and like, I don't know what's going on. So as I said, my name is Amanda. I'm here at the ReBuilding Center. I hope many of you are, if you're local here to Portland, you have been to the ReBuilding Center. And if not, you should come by. We are open, I believe, every day except Mondays. And there's a lot of opportunity to get stuff that has been taken out of homes or offices or businesses that has still has life in it, and you can put it in your home and save a lot of money and keep stuff out of the landfill. So we are all about building resilience through community and education, which is why you are all here this evening. So let's talk about plumbing. Again, we are going to be talking about plumbing repair, some of the basics of plumbing, some places where you might see some leaks, and just some basic tips. We'll talk about how the water travels through your house, about faucets and drains a little bit, and toilets. And what we're not going to be talking about, though, well, most of that will relate to your bathroom. Again, I'm not a licensed plumber, so if you have any questions that are specific to code or anything like that, or if you have questions that are beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, I do recommend that you get in touch with a plumber. Okay, so my #1 rule of plumbing is know how to shut your water off. And there are two main ways I'm going to tell you how to do that. One of which is at the street, and one of which is at the supply valve. And the yes, in the supply valve. There's a couple of reasons you would want to know how to do this. One is for emergencies. So for example, there's the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, and you have water coming out of your house and you can't shut it off. Knowing how to shut that off at the street is a great emergency tip to have. So emergency reasons, you might want to do that. Another reason you might want to do that is, let's say you are trying to fix your faucet, you fix the leak and you shut off the valve underneath the sink, but you still have water coming through. It may be that you need to shut it off at the street because there's something wrong with the valve. And if you can't shut it off at the valve, then you need to shut it off upstream of that. So knowing how to shut it off at the street is a useful thing. If you live in a single family or duplex home, chances are you will have something that looks like this on your screen. It is a concrete box with a metal cover on it. And this one is the one in my front yard. It says city water meter on it. Yours may look slightly different. If you live in a multi-family or an apartment building, this is going to be a little different for you. So you may want to check with your building supervisor and find out about where your water shutoff is. But when you open, you put a tool inside that little hole there and you pull that lid off, and you are going to see something. It's going to be full of spiders and leaves. And so if I could offer you any kind of homework to do this evening, I would recommend that you go out to your street and you find your water meter. Perhaps you want to do this during daylight hours, but you go out to your water meter, you pull off the lid, and you clean it out, because you don't want to have to be trying to figure out what's in here in an emergency and have to be cleaning it out and being worried about leaves and spiders at the same time. So the little valve there that you see, there's a, I have the little red arrow pointing at it, helpfully. That is the water valve. And if you notice the line, the little valve is vertical, and that shows, well, that there is a tool immediately above it. And that is a water meter key. And you would just slip that key over the valve and you turn it to your right. And you are probably familiar with the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey idea of having your, tightening a faucet versus loosening a faucet. Same kind of thing is with your water meter. So if you turn it all the way to the right, chances are it will tighten. If you turn it all the way to the left, it will loosen. And you can turn it off or on that way. You, as the homeowner, can turn your water off or on at will if you need to. Just as a quick contrast, if for whatever reason you need to turn your gas main off, you as the homeowner can do that in the case of an emergency. However, for your gas main, you should not turn the gas main on yourself. You should have the gas company do that yourself, or call them for that. That's all I'm going to say about gas companies. But so for the water meter key, there are a couple different types. This is one, it's called a 4-in-1 tool. This part right here has the little notch that you can put on your water meter and turn like this. This is also good for your emergency kit, because this little hook right here you can pull that little metal cover on your water meter, pull it up with this, and it will also, it's a tool to turn off your gas meter as well. And it's made of aluminum, so it won't spark, but that's a whole other thing. This is also a water meter key. It's kind of an older one, but again, it has this little hook, or this little U shape on the end that you would just put on your water meter, the valve there, and you would turn one way or the other to turn that on or off. And that's a good tool to have. If there's lots of different styles of water meter keys, you can go to your hardware store and just search for water meter key, as in like a key to a house. They're going to be $10, $15 depending on which one you purchase. It's a useful thing to have around your house. We often get questions about whether or not you can turn the water off at the valve in your basement if you do have one. That is also an option for you. In my own house, I live in a house that's about 100 years old, and the plumber that we had out at our house said to not turn the water off in the basement, because that valve is old and could potentially throw some particulate into the line and maybe not shut off entirely. So that plumber told us to advised us to turn the water off at the street if we needed to. So your basement one may be just fine. Maybe you can turn it off there, but I always advise people to know how to turn it off at the street. Just another place you can turn your water off, generally behind any sink or underneath any sink or behind your washing machine or something like that, is at a valve. Looks something like this, most likely. And this part will be sticking out of the wall or your floor, and then there will be a supply line that is sticking out of the top. And this will attach to your sink or your washing machine or whatever. This supply line is, we'll talk a little bit more about these in a bit. But these can be, you can get different lengths and whatnot if you need to for that. But it is probably already set up properly for your house. But if you want to turn off your valve or turn it on, you can, again, lefty, loosey, righty-tighty. And if you need to turn off the water to your sink, for example, if you're changing or you're looking at the cartridge on your faucet, which we'll describe here in just a few moments, you would want to turn this all the way off so that there's no water going through the line to your sink before you do anything with that. So it's a good thing to know where your water supply line is, or where your supply valve is. And there are a couple different kinds of plungers. The typical kind you'll see is or often is just sort of the little little cup, and maybe sometimes it has a short handle on it. That is actually for a sink. It's not for a toilet. So the ones for the toilets have a much bigger bulb on the bottom. They might even have sort of like an accordion plastic area that it expands or contracts. That's for a toilet. That's going to work a lot better. It's going to have a longer handle on it. So I recommend that you pick one of those up again before you need them. So, the word of the day is going to be the word gasket. And what a gasket is in this context is a squishy thing between two hard parts. So it could be inside, for example, inside this supply line, there is a squishy rubber gasket inside there, so that when these, actually there's one on this side too, when these two pieces get threaded together, that squishy part can form a seal so that the water can't leak out. So if you have a water leak of some kind, it's most likely because the gasket has failed in some context. So maybe there's some sand that's gotten into it, or it has broken for some other reason. So generally, if you can figure out which gasket has failed and replace that gasket, chances are you can solve that leak. Another gasket you may have heard of, maybe not in those terms, but is the plumber's tape. That's this kind of diaphanous, non-adhesive, but this tape that you can put around threads on pipes. That serves as a gasket. Again, it provides a surface that keeps water from penetrating out, and yeah, just makes it so it doesn't. Couple quick plumbing tips. First of all, drains are not a magical portal. That is from one of our other instructors, Shona. And so whatever you put down a drain, it's got to go somewhere, whether that is coffee grounds, not a great idea to put down your sink. Tampons, would not do it. Flushable wipes are a lie. Do not use, or do not put flushable wipes into your toilet. They will get clogged. If you're interested in learning more about that, Google the fatberg under the London sewer, or in the London sewers. Pretty horrifying. Yeah, I'll leave you to look at that if you want to. But so I would not put any kind of, or just be careful that, you know, whatever goes down your drain, it's got to go through the pipes and into the sewer system from there. So not a magical portal. If you are doing some work on your plumbing for whatever reason, you're replacing your faucet, you're not sure what you're doing, take pictures as you go along. That way, if you need to go to the hardware store, for example, you can take the pictures and say, hey, I need one of these. Or even better, if you have a measuring tape that you can put next to where you're taking the picture, so you can get a scale of what the thing is. Or if it's something that you can take with you to the hardware store, and that way you can test it out and make sure that you're getting the appropriate replacement. Good idea. Another thing to have handy, especially if you're going to be doing anything under a sink, is to have a headlamp available to you. It's going to make things a lot clearer, a lot easier to manage. And if you have, this obviously doesn't apply if you are having an emergency leak situation, but if you have an option, if you are replacing a faucet or doing something that is optional, I recommend that you not do it on a Sunday night or Sunday afternoon, I recommend that you do it early in the day when you can go to the hardware store, because I guarantee you that you will have to go to the hardware store at least once, probably twice, given any plumbing job. And this is said as somebody who does a fair amount of plumbing related things. Again, I'm not a professional plumber, but I have done a fair amount of things. And even last bathroom remodel I did, or vanity, I thought I had everything, and we still had to go to the hardware store at least twice. So make sure that you are in a place where you can either get to the store or stop, and you're not going to have water leaking anywhere. And then one other quick tip that's going to come in relevant here in just a moment is that some plumbing things you only need to hand tighten, and other things you can use a tool on. For example, where is it? You can use a crescent wrench, something like this, where you can adjust the aperture of the opening here. This is another tool that you might want to have. I believe Channel Lock is the brand name, but this is if you go into it's like Kleenex. If you ask for a Channel Lock, they'll know what you're talking about, even if it's not the appropriate brand. But you can change the aperture of the wrench here. I prefer Channel Locks to crescent wrenches, just because these always seem to move more than I want them to. The opening seems to move more than I would wish. The second. So again, I mentioned that some of the things you only need to hand tighten. And how do you know? If you are doing something that is plastic, or plastic to plastic, for example, you only need to hand tighten. A good example of that might be, well, I'll show you some on the sink, the drain here in just a moment. But for example, if you look at your toilet, there's two bolts sticking up through the floor and holding your toilet down. You only want to hand tighten those bolts down, the nuts on that, because if you took a tool like this and you really started cranking hard on that, you might crack the porcelain on the bottom of the toilet, which that's a whole other host of problems. So be aware of when you need to hand tighten versus using a tool. And how you could tell if you need to use a tool is, for example, this supply line here. It's a little hard to tell, but it's hexagonal, it's metal, it looks like it is set up to have a crescent wrench fit directly on that. And that is a place where you could use a crescent wrench or a Channel Lock wrench, and that would be appropriate. Again, it's metal to metal, and it looks like it's supposed to have a wrench on it. So something to keep in mind there. Okay, faucets. So I'm going to talk a little bit just briefly about why faucets leak. And there could be a couple of different reasons, but the most common reason is because a cartridge has failed. Now, what is a cartridge? Well, there are generally two. If you have a faucet that has two handles like this, each one of these has a cartridge. And then if you have one that is more like this, with the single, there's still a cartridge in here. It's going to look a little bit different, but it's the thing inside the faucet. Let's see. So when this is sitting on your sink, there's a cold water supply and a hot water supply. And what these cartridges do is they allow you to adjust how much of the respective flavor temperature is the word I'm looking for, how much of the appropriate temperature you want, so that you can have warm water versus all hot or all cold, and it lets you adjust the flow rate and whatnot. And so again, sometimes the water has to go through the cartridge and then go out the actual faucet. So if one of the gaskets in the cartridge has failed, that could cause it so that there is just instead of shutting off the entire way when you turn the faucet off, if one of the gaskets has broken, it could allow water to leak through, and that's why you might have a leaky faucet. So how do you check that? Well, the first thing you would want to do is to look under your sink and to turn off your supply lines. So again, this is the back side of a vanity, and this pipe just has rocks in it to keep this held down, so you can ignore this piece. But this is our demonstration piece that's going to be the most well lit and driest you will ever see this kind of setup. But you would want to turn these supply valves off before you do anything with the faucet if you're trying to check the cartridges. So turn both of them off. Even if you know that it's only leaking hot water, you still want to turn the cold one off as well. It's just best practice to do that. Okay, so once you've turned both of those off, we're going to come up here. The way you get into this faucet is kind of sneaky. You see there's the hot and the cold letters here. This is actually a cap. So you just pop that off. And your faucet's going to look a little bit different, but there will most likely be some kind of cap one way or the other. And then you take your, this in this case is a Phillips screw, and so there we go. Off, and that. So now you're going to have something that looks like there's no cover on it. This is a case where you would want to use a tool because it's a little hard to see on the camera, but there is this hexagonal shape around here, and it's also metal, so I can unscrew that. Lo and behold, here is a cartridge. And it's a little hard to see on the camera, but there's a little kind of gasket right here. And if I had both hands, I could show you how it moves, but trust me, it does. There is another kind of gasket from a different kind of sink or a different kind of faucet. So they're all going to look a little bit different. So what I would recommend doing is taking your gasket out. And this is one of those cases where you would want to take this to the hardware store with you and say, hey, I have this kind of sink and I'm sorry, this kind of faucet. And if you can get the faucet brand, that's handy, but strictly necessary. But I have one of these and I need a new cartridge for that. Depending on the cost, it may be worth just replacing both cartridges. And because if one fails, there's possibility that the other one will fail as well, or get a second one just so that you have it on hand in case. But then all you do is you put that back, you screw that back on, take your tool, tighten that down, and then just repeat. And again, this may be a place where you want to take pictures as you go along, so that way that you have a record of what you did in case you need to figure that out, recreate that. You just put that back on and there you go. You may have a faucet that looks like this. You're like, how do I get into that? It's a little sneaky, but there is a set screw right there. So in this case, it's a little hexagonal wrench, like the little Allen wrenches you get at, but you just open that up and that handle comes right off. And then at this point, you unscrew this whole thing. This is a ball, kind of a gasket, or I'm sorry, a cartridge. And there's a gasket right here that could have splits. There's some gaskets inside there. There's a lot of different places where there could be a split gasket or a missing or broken gasket. So this may be something that you can take this to your hardware store or ask somebody at a plumbing store to give you some advice on how to replace this piece. So So this is the direction that you'll most likely see your vanity from, because it's, let me move this back looking under the sink this way. And you may have seen this thing right here before. And what that is called is a Ptrap, as in the letter P. There is also, it may also be called a J trap. I guess it's just to show what the letter looks like, or what letter it mimics. But that is an important piece of plumbing hardware. And what happens is that there is a little reservoir of water that gets stuck at the bottom of that P-trap. And that water prevents air from coming up from your drain pipe and then out your sink. And you can imagine that the air that's inside the drain pipes does not smell very good. So it's important to have a functioning P-trap. And you'll see P-traps on other sinks. There's one at the bottom of a toilet as well. You may never have noticed it, but it's there. And I mention this because this could also be another place that I could see some leaking. If, for example, you see some water leaking at the bottom of your vanity or underneath your sink, it could be that one of these connections is not tight enough. So you may want to kind of look around there and see if there's a piece that one of these that needs to be tightened down. And again, I mentioned how this would be a good example of something that you would not want to put a wrench on. This is definitely something that you would only need to hand tighten. And the way you can tell is it's plastic. It does not have that hexagonal shape. It looks like it, you can, these little flanges on here are so that you can wedge that on with your fingers as opposed to using a tool. And it's plastic, so you don't need to crank on it too hard. But let's say you drop something down your sink. You have an earring or that screw that I just dropped in the sink when I was trying to fix the faucet a minute ago. Or you have a sink that is not draining properly and it's plugged up. A good place to test or to look for all of that would be to check out the P-trap. Now, what you're going to want here is some sort of a bucket, or depending on how close this is to your vanity floor, you might need something more along the lines of a Tupperware dish or a casserole dish or something that's going to be low enough to fit underneath there. But what's going to happen is if you can unscrew this here. Okay. So you can take this out, and then there's going to be some water that leaks down. And you can, at this point, you can either take this and dump this into your toilet. It's not going to smell very good. Or you can just dump it into the receptacle there and then dump that into your toilet. But take a look inside here. This is probably where your earring or the set screw is going to be lodged. This is also potentially where there's a big gob of hair, which is lovely. But if you can clean this out and then put this back on and attach it back again, chances are things are going to work out a lot better for you. And again, make sure it's tightened down well enough with your hand so that it doesn't leak. I find that if I take a piece of paper towel, or if anybody has newspapers anymore, and you put that underneath and you run the faucet for a little while, that will, you'll be able to see if there's a leak a lot easier than if you, for example, put a terry cloth towel down. That's just going to look wet, but it's not going to necessarily show you where it is wet. So let's talk about toilets a bit. Toilets are the #1 source of leaks in your house. And the #1 place that a leak is going to happen is right here. This is called the flapper valve. And so let's talk a little bit about how the anatomy of your toilet and how water gets there and why that would be a problem. So I'm going to scoot back a little bit. This is your supply valve. it is going to come up most likely if you're facing your toilet. It's going to be on the left side somewhere most likely. This will be attached to a supply line, or I'm sorry, a supply valve on your floor or in your wall, and then attached to the bottom here. Now, this is a filler. This is a newer one. You may, depending on the age of your toilet, you may have one of the ball valve ones, which I don't have an example here, but it's a mechanism that's vertical here with an arm and a big ball that is inflated with air that floats. And the idea for both of these is that when water comes up into the tank, it will raise this thing, this fill valve, to the point where it is, this one's actually a little short for this, but that's okay, where it is just about at the height of this tube here. And what this tube, this is the overflow tube. So it will fill up a bunch of water here until it gets to this point, and if it overfills, the water will flow into this tube and into the bowl and out, and then your toilet's just going to keep running. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's say that this is full of water and you're ready to flush the toilet. So what you do is you press the lever here, and it opens this flapper valve, and it opens up this hole. Now at that point, the water goes down into the bowl and swirls around there. And then down, here's that Ptrap. Let me go back here, yeah. Here's that Ptrap I was talking about. So this is where that is in your toilet. And it goes down underneath there and then down into the drain. And again, the place that is most common for it to leak is here at the flapper valve. And what can happen, lots of different reasons. For example, this chain is at the wrong height. So this is just attached with a little hook, and the hook can be changed. There's a couple different holes on the arm here. You can change where it is on the chain. If it's too tight, it might not let it close entirely, or if it's too loose, maybe it's not working properly. If the way you would know if your flapper valve is not functioning properly is, let's say, excuse me, let's say you flush the toilet and then you go away, and then 10 minutes later you hear it start running again, and then it stops. And then it starts running again in 10 minutes, and then it stops. Or maybe it's an hour in between or 2 hours in between, but still it starts running when nobody is in there. It's not that you have a ghost, it's that water is leaking through here into the bowl and causing the water to dip below this point here. And so this thing says, oh no, I've run out of water, I need to fill up again. And that cycle continues as long as this part is not sealing properly. So the way you fix that, these are really easy to replace. All you do is, easiest way to do this would be to turn off the water supply at the bottom so that no more water can come up into the tank, and then flush the toilet so that as much water drains out of the back of the toilet as you can. You're gonna get your hands a little bit wet, but it's clean water at this point. So once you have this pretty much empty, you can just pop that off right there. And they sell these. This one says that it fits Toto brands, and Toto is a pretty common brand of toilet. You can either take this in with you to the hardware store, or if you know what kind of toilet you have, you can go and see if there's a universal one for your brand of toilet. That may be a possibility as well. These are going to be, I don't know, again, $10 or something, pretty easy. It has a gasket on the bottom here, and this is probably the thing that has failed, or it's not sitting properly for some reason. And then all you do when you've got that back is you just put that in there, make sure that it's lifting properly and closing properly, and then you turn the water back on and the water fills back up. And there you go. Test it out and make sure that it's not continuing to run. If it is continuing to run, there might be something wrong with your fill valve. These are also really replaceable. Again, you have to drain the tank, and then these, you can just get a new one at the hardware store. Again, may want to check the brand of toilet that you have, and get the appropriate one for that. But this just unscrews here, bottom, and there are some, we often get some questions about high flow or low flow toilets. Obviously, for water conservation purposes, it's best to have a toilet that uses less water. And sometimes people achieve that. They have an older toilet and they achieve the lower flow by putting something into the back of the tank here. And that can be a good idea. Some people will use a brick or something like that. And that is not a great idea, because often the bricks, if they're left in water for a while, they can potentially corrode, or not corrode, but the disintegrate a little bit. And some of that particulate can get into this gasket here, and that can be the cause of failure for the flapper valve. So if you do want to do that, I would recommend using, say, a 2-liter bottle and filling it with water, and pardon me, putting a lid on the bottle and then putting that bottle in the back here. So it's taking up that volume of water, but it's not going to corrode or disintegrate. You'll want to make sure that your toilet has enough water and oomph to flush appropriately, because some of the older ones, you know, take 3 or 4 gallons of water, and they really need that to be able to flush, whereas the newer ones are built to be at a lower flow. And inside here underneath, there are a lot of little holes that allow the water to swirl around and then go into the toilet. Those, depending on if you have hard water, there could be mineral buildup in that. I don't know how to fix that, other than maybe using a pumice stone or something. Pumice is a volcanic rock that's very light, and you can use it, you can scrape it on porcelain. I would test it in a place first to make sure that it's not going to scratch, but it shouldn't. But using that might be an abrasive way to clear out some of those holes, maybe. So the idea with the dye is, if you have a leak in your toilet, if you put some dye in and you don't use the toilet, the idea is that it will, if it's running, or if you suspect that there's a leak, but you're not hearing it run, but you still think it's leaking because your water bill is really high, you put the dye in, and it should, hypothetically anyway, leak into the bowl. And so if you haven't used the toilet, you can go back in and say, oh yeah, well, I put red dye in the top and now it's in the bowl as well. If it's not showing up, I might try a different color and more of it. If that's not it, I would try replacing the flapper valve. Again, it's going to be a pretty inexpensive, hopefully inexpensive fix for you, because if it's running, it's filling somewhere, or it's filling here and it's got to go somewhere. So I'm not sure where that would be other than into the bowl. I would try the flapper valve first. If that doesn't work, then there are some other adjustments. If you have one of this style of fill valves, like you can adjust this thing here, which will change, you know, there's different heights. There may be some instructions, if you can get the brand name on here, there may be some instructions online for like at what height the thing is supposed to be in relation to the fill valve, or I'm sorry, the overflow valve. It's going to be specific to your toilet, but yeah, there may be some adjustments that you can make there. I would take this piece out if it's one of these valves, the fill valve here, and it has this little adjustment, or this little tube that sticks in the side of the overflow valve here. This may not be adjusted properly, and I believe that this is Yeah, if it's spraying out of there, that is a weird thing. I'm not quite sure what to tell you about that, other than if you can take this piece and kind of adjust it, it may not be in the appropriate position. And yeah, on occasion the flusher handle sticks. What's the culprit there? Could be a couple of things. First off, if this is if the chain is not quite the right length, if it's too long or too short, or something, there could be some weirdness there. Another thing is that this here is it's a little hard to see, but this is another point that you can unscrew, and I can't do it without a tool, but this might be too tight here. So you might need to put a crescent wrench on here and kind of loosen this a little bit. Yeah, I would open up the back of your toilet and see if you can mimic the problem that you're having, and seeing, because this should move without any kind of hitch. And if it does get stuck somewhere, and you can actually see that happen, it'll be a little bit easier for you to troubleshoot that. So but yeah, I would adjust the chain and then adjust this part right here if you need to. Thank you all for being here. We're going to sign off, and we hope to see you at another class here at the ReBuilding Center soon. Thanks.
Hi, I'm back. I hope you I hope you learned something. I do want to make a quick change to something I said in the video. I said that you should be careful when you, if you use a tool, if you are tightening the bolts on your toilet, if there's bolts on either side of the foot to hold it to the floor. And I said in the video that you shouldn't use a tool on that because you might crack the porcelain. I wasn't entirely correct on that. You can use a tool. It is a hexagonal metal bolt on there, or a metal nut on there actually. I would just recommend going slowly, not cranking on it really hard, because you could potentially crack the porcelain. But if you go slow and only tighten it as much as you need to, rather than just cranking on it a whole bunch, it should be just fine. So just wanted to make that one little adjustment to what I said in the video. Are there any questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. It does look like we have a question that you mentioned, the special wrench that you were talking about on the video. Is that, or any of the other tools, something that we'd be able to find at some of the local tool libraries?
Yeah, assuming that they're open. I know that the one in Northeast where I go currently isn't open, but yeah, either the crescent wrenches or the channel lock wrenches, I'm nearly positive that they would have both of those things there. Those are pretty common tools. Those might even, if you are trying to build a toolkit yourself, a channel lock would be one of the first things I would suggest that you get.
That's perfect. I also dropped in the chat here for everybody, for all the attendees, our website that has our resource library on it that has all of the contact information for the different tool libraries around town. So you can always feel free to check with them. And as Amanda mentioned, some of them may be operating under special hours or may not be open right now. So definitely contact to see where we're at. Amanda, another question for you of my clawfoot tub faucet seems stripped. Is this an easy repair or maybe too big of a question?
The faucet, meaning the handle isn't engaging, and I'm not sure if you're watching on Facebook, so that, or when you'll get that answer or when you'll get that response. But basically what I'm going to say is, if it's something where there's an obvious screw on the handle that you can take a flathead screwdriver or a Phillips head screwdriver and just unscrew that faucet handle and pull that off, kind of take a look around, that may help you identify what the problem is. Other than that, I'm going to suggest that if you have any problems with your shower or your bathtub drain or faucet or anything like that, I'm going to recommend talking to a plumber about that, or at least that's beyond the scope of this class, because even if I'm having trouble with my own shower at home, there are some challenges with finding things within the wall and whatnot there. So I would recommend calling a plumber for most things related to showers and bathtubs.
Great. That looks like all of the questions we have for right now. I know you answered like every question I had in the video. So perfect. That's awesome. If folks do have questions later on, they can feel free to shoot us an email. That email address is also in the chat, both on Facebook and in the Zoom meeting here. And we can follow up with Amanda and Rebuilding Center to get those answers to you as best we can. So
Great.
anything else, Amanda? Words of wisdom?
I am developing some new classes for us here. We are going to be working on one that is specifically for how to replace a toilet, and some other classes as well. So if any of you watching or whoever are interested in some other classes, and we can potentially partner with you folks at Fix It Fair and bring some new classes to you. So if you have some ideas, please let us know.